Alright, so I want to talk about the state of League of Legends right now. I know there's been like a lot of stuff that's been going on Reddit. Let me just switch here. You're right. So I know there's like a lot of stuff that's going on Reddit. People are talking about top lane and all that nonsense. I've been talking about League and its decline for quite a while now. I'd say since towards the end of 2014, Season 4, and a lot during the start of 2015. I actually wrote a lot about the direction in which League is going, and I actually wrote this huge article recently about what's going on with League. And if you guys are like, if any of you are interested on the design philosophies of Riot, I really urge you to read this article. I really go in depth about all the stuff that goes on with Riot. So if you don't know me, I'm Nicone. I've been Challenger almost every season. I've been high rank before Challenger existed. And I mainly played Fiddlesticks. I played some other stuff, but it was usually Fiddlesticks. So I'm streaming right now, making this video to talk about, of course, the problems with League. And I made this little document right here. Right, so I wanted to talk about Hsien-Shin first. So Hsien-Shin is talking about top lane being in a crappy state. You know, he's not enjoying it. A lot of people are giving him shit on Reddit. If you're watching this, don't make threads like this. This is, like, how obviously can you ride, like, the Reddit train to get upvotes and attention? Like, what does this provide? You're doing a disservice to the community by posting things like this. It's obviously not in a good spot. It hasn't been for a while. The entire game hasn't been for a while. And this kind of stuff is just disrespectful, and it doesn't provide anything. So don't make posts like this on Reddit. This is just embarrassing. Hsien-Shin, whether you agree with what he's saying or not, he brings up a lot of valid points. Again, he talks about top lane kind of being in a state that's not really fun. You know, it's not fun facing Jace and Teemo and Camille and Fiora every game. It's not fun playing against tanks every game. You know, to a certain extent, I agree. Personally, I'm not a top laner, so I don't know the nuances with top lane, but I do know that it's being affected by something that is really more of a fundamental problem with League than, you know, anything else. Alorum's a troll. I don't know. I have no respect for Alorum for posting this. This is just ridiculous. But anyway, so first I wanted to talk about the fundamental changes to League and why top lane is really sensitive to this kind of stuff. So with top lane, and this has shown itself historically over and over again, top lane, whenever there is a fundamental change to League of Legends, top lane, the problem usually surfaces in top lane first. Before it hits any other lane, any other role, anything else in the game, it's usually the most obvious in top lane. So right now, there's a problem in League where the design is being pushed in a certain, very nuanced direction. You look at all the champion reworks, and, I mean, my god, when I wrote this article, I shit on the champion reworks so much. I think they're all horrible, personally. I know there are a lot of reworks that have, you know, been successful. The visual side of things are very good, but from the gameplay, the design aspect of things, everything becomes a skill shot. Everything becomes overly complicated, and everything just has to have a lower cooldown, a lower mana cost. It needs to be repetitive. All the abilities need to coexist with each other and interact with each other in some way or form. And you look at all the new champions and all of their abilities, and you hover your mouse over their abilities, and it's like you have to read a book just to understand each ability. And this really goes against the original design philosophy of League, which was an accessible game, a borderline casual game, and it was just easy to pick up and play with your friends. It's not really the case anymore that it's kind of easy to pick up. And if you disagree, I challenge you to find a champion who kind of qualifies as an introductory champion. I don't think they exist anymore. Every champion you look at now, all of their abilities are extremely overly complex for almost no reason. All of the abilities interact with each other in some way or form, and they're just long and they're tedious to read, and they don't really make sense from an aesthetic point of view. Yeah, Annie maybe, but Annie's not really a successful champion right now. Right. So my next point was the core philosophy of the game is moving in a direction that is less appealing to players like Hsien-Hsien and players like myself. Before I talk about this, I want to preface, most of what Hsien-Hsien is talking about is the enjoyment aspect of the game. He's not really saying, I mean, I guess you can extrapolate this from what he's saying if you're an idiot or a troll, that he's saying, hey, make the game, you know, balance it around a way that suits my playstyle. That's not really what he's saying. What he's saying is he doesn't really enjoy the game very much anymore. The game kind of forces you, it bottlenecks you to play a way that is pretty much approved by Riot. It's kind of like they have a checklist, and if you don't do what's approved on their checklist, you really won't see that much success in your gameplay. And of course, success equates to fun. Usually, if you're not having fun with a game, you're not very successful at it, and vice versa. So that's important to understand, that Hsien-Hsien is mostly talking about the enjoyment of the game. But in any case, players like me and Hsien-Hsien, and I don't want to name off too many players, but there are also players like that we haven't seen or have been gone for a while, like a Zingy. A lot of these older players that have left, they had a certain type of play style. They're not extremely similar, but rather unconventional, and it's not really welcome in League of Legends anymore. And I mean, I have a lot of data to back this up, and I will be showing it later on in the video. But why Hsien-Hsien is so frustrated, why I'm so frustrated, why I've quit League, and why I have friends who were high elo who are also either struggling or have quit League, is because League is not really that accessible to players like us anymore, who have a rather unconventional play style and not really the more refined mechanical skill that those in really high rankings or, you know, in very competitive play, the skills that they possess. It's not that we don't have them, but we have a higher aptitude for a different type of skill. And that skill is not really relevant in League anymore. So that kind of leads to my next point, which is, okay, so Hsien-Hsien comes from a point of view of top lane, right? So in top lane, when I saw Medler's post, it was very idealistic, and he went into that himself. He was talking about how top lane ought to be, rather than what they're actually going to do. It's easy to say, I guess most people would agree with this. In top lane, you want the player who plays better to win. That's what the ideal... Well, in every role, in every lane, you want the player who plays better to win. But I challenge you guys, what does it mean to actually play better? Like, how can you actually gauge who plays better? There is no actual way to do it. If you really think about it critically, there is no real way to figure out who played better. The only thing you can really look at are the results. You can look at, you know, who generates more gold, who won the game, whatever. All of that can be compiled, and I'm sure you would agree, all of that would be compiled to your ranking. So, how do you determine who plays better? Well, a higher rank in general, the way to attain a higher rank is to win games. So therefore, the higher ranking you have, the more well you play. So with that, let's assume there are two players, right? Players A and B. Okay? Player A possesses skill or intelligence X, and then player B possesses a different skill or intelligence. We'll label that Y. Both players A and B, are playing the same game, game G, right? Now let's assume in game G, skill X is more effective at returning a victory, and skill Y is less effective. Although player B is more skilled in Y, whatever skill they possess, than player A returns more victories anyway. So who played better? Although player A won the game, player B possessed a stronger skill, a specific type of skill, and therefore the game itself is responsible for player A's victory. This matters because although player B possesses a stronger aptitude, or natural skill, or even refined skill, they are still returning weaker results than player B, and this can become extremely frustrating. So when I spoke about Hishinshin and players like myself, or old players who are gone, players right now who are struggling, who used to be very good at the game, they possess different types of skill. So when it comes to intelligence, it's really hard to define what intelligence is and what skill is. Personally, I like to use Sternberg's model of intelligence, which is three, I guess, aspects. You got analytical, creative, and practical, and I go over this in my article. It would appear to me that people in the West, players like myself and Hishinshin, and just Western players in general, tend to have a higher aptitude for creative intelligence, whereas those in Eastern Asia, where League is currently very appealing and seems to be less appealing in the West, or is at least becoming less appealing, they seem to possess a different type of intelligence, some sort of analytical intelligence, which it appears to me that League is going in the direction where those who only possess the rigorous analytical intelligence are the ones who can be successful at the game. This is extremely important. And we can see that the game more and more is going in this direction. When you look at all the champion reworks, all the abilities require higher APM, lower cooldowns, lower mana costs. I mean, you don't see things like Old Scion anymore. You don't see things coming out like Karthus anymore. And, I mean, that would imply that the game doesn't really want you to have any sort of creativity or ability to think ahead, which Westerners are very good at. And you can see that with the Hearthstone championships, the chess championships. I mean, there are a ton of statistics that back this up. Westerners in general are very good at games that require creativity and the ability to think ahead, whereas Koreans are really good at games that kind of require you to have a higher APM, and they require you to be very rigorous and monotonous in the type of play style that you want to adapt to. And it seems like League is not really interested in the older play style that they had, where the game was a lot slower, was a lot more drawn out, required you to really think before you either went in, used an ability, whatever it was. It really required you to think. Now, it's not so much about the thinking, more the execution. And when it comes to that, it seems people in the West aren't really interested in games like that. It seems those types of games will always be appealing primarily to Eastern Asians, Koreans, etc., as we can see from results from, historically. So, I mean, that's most of everything I want to talk about. Again, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I really urge you to read my article, ask questions, whatever it is. I'd be more than glad to answer. But in any case, right, so I want to talk about Ghostcrawler a little bit before I wrap up. I mean, he's obviously, less creativity, more execution. World of Warcraft, League of Legends. He's not directly responsible for this, but it would seem that his design philosophy tends towards the same results in general. Pseudoscience? No pseudoscience. So again, and by the way, I took this screenshot a while ago. This is not League of Legends. This is esports. This was on the League subreddit, and usually when you go to the League subreddit, I mean 9 out of 10 times, all of the posts are about esports. I don't mind esports. I used to enjoy esports, but it shouldn't be the only aspect in the game. It shouldn't be that the game is only for competition. There should be a lot of casual aspects, and that's kind of why League was successful. It was very casual and accessible. It's not the case anymore. The game seems to be becoming overly complex, and it's just completely unnecessary. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Please remember, the same people, or the people who are working on League of Legends now on the Riot design team, are not the same people who have began to work on the game when it was first launched. That can create problems. Obviously, when they create the game, they have a certain philosophy in mind, and then when you hire different people with different ideas, you can kind of stray away from the original idea, and you end up with some sort of an abomination of a game, which doesn't really fit in any category. So with that, I usually advocate for newer games rather than constantly updating and rehashing older ones. But that's a different discussion entirely. Again, I go into that in my article, which I urge you to read. But that'll be it. Thank you.